Hi, welcome everyone. This is the third, I believe, job crafting conversation that we're having, and I'm really delighted to be speaking today to Megan Chalmers. And Megan, thank you so much for investing your time with us today. And I know that people are really keen to hear from practitioners and HR professionals who've explored the job crafting. And I know you've done some work in this area, which I'm delighted to to hear about. And so thanks very much for your
Mhm.
time. And we're always happy to talk about anyone who's curious about job crafting here on these chats. So to start with, Megan, would you mind just introducing yourself, telling us a little about your role? And we're always interested about things that you love and you loathe about your kind of job, past or present, I suppose. The things that light you up
Mhm.
and the things that maybe dampen you down.
Sure. Well, I'm currently a people or a HR business partner at Virgin Australia. Um, and something that I've really enjoyed since I've been working there, and I suppose what I've enjoyed all through my roles, um, is that, especially in my current role, is the ability that we can bring our individual strengths and passions into our roles. Um, Even with my role currently being project based, there's lots of ways we just seem to organically be able um, to bring that in. Yeah.
So, and where did you has that
Yes,
strength based approach something you've always lent to? Is that or something you could have actually
it
adapted at some
is.
point, or
Yeah,
where's that come from you?
yeah. Well, the strength base comes from a bit of a personal aspect. I do have a son who is on the autism strength spectrum as well. So, looking at his strengths, given he's very much a perfectionism and looks at the other side of things, and just bringing that approach into my life. And I suppose you could say that's where my passion has fueled me as a HR practitioner as well, because I'm able to see the strengths in other people too, and be able to, I suppose, think small about how we can make little adaptations and changes so that we
Ah,
have an inclusive work environment.
that's nice. So they could have that it's something an
Mm.
approach that you as personally and professionally that you could have that you abide to and take forward. That's
Mm.
fantastic.
Yeah,
And we're here to talk about job
yeah,
crafting today. So I'd be curious to know about
yes,
when did you first come across job crafting, and maybe from beyond that, around when did you kind of discovered it? What were you how did you kind of decide to experiment and test it out? Because I know you have got a bit of experience in
sure.
this space.
Yes, I completed my HR certification last year, although still pending the certification
Fingers
council.
crossed.
Um, Yes, fingers crossed. And the business problem that I identified was junior employee retention. So it was looking at that baseline data and then starting to explore what approaches were available in that that could help. And I've got to focus. I love the talent management side of things on the L&OD. So I started exploring different aspects, and I came across job crafting, and started to read into it as well. I went, this sounds really interesting, and like many people, realised that I had crafted my role or my career many times myself. But look, taking that into account, I didn't just go ahead and implement it in the organization. I explored the concept myself first
Ah,
and started to learn about it. Um, but it obviously realized the benefits of it just for myself and proposed it as an opportunity for the business problem. And we introduced a talent management program. We piloted that last year. So it worked a mixture of, positive psychology, so the PERMA and appreciative inquiry, but also tapping into character strengths and then followed through with job crafting. Also used a bit of a coaching and support approach by senior leaders in the firm as well. So it was great to implement that and also learn more about job crafting
yeah. So
myself.
loads of questions
Mm.
from that. So in terms of the first thing, so in terms of literally, was
Mm.
it for the job crafting? Was it for a you're reading about articles or kind of elements, and then you kind of came across it? Was that how it came about?
Yes. I'm also a very, um, I love my podcasts, and had just listened to one by Michelle McQuaid on job
Yeah,
crafting. Um, it just, I think, like many of us, we when we find that passion or that the intense interest, it just sparks something inside of us that, like, we need to know more, need to explore, find out a little bit more about it. Um, and yeah, it just yeah, more articles, found a book, a couple of books as well, and started to. I just really couldn't put them
that's
down.
really good. And
Um,
sometimes that happens, isn't it? When you come across a concept, certainly for
mm,
me, you think, oh, this is interesting. I want to
mm,
go explore and experiment with this. And I love that.
it
It really
is.
interested that you were
Yeah,
saying to start with, you wanted to go explore it to see whether it works for yourself as well first. And I think that sometimes that
mm,
aspects, I think, when it comes to well, I'd get your view on this, but when it comes to working with training or with ideas, very often we just give them to people to kind of say go and
mm,
use. Whereas actually, I think the first step for a lot of these things have to be
yeah,
kind of learning about them and living them for yourself to see, and then once you've done that, you can lead them. So you've got some
absolutely.
tangible kind of experience
Yeah,
of doing it.
yeah, absolutely, and explored with the tiny habits as well. The concept there, so really tapped into some of the organizational psychology, and behavior science as well, just to try and make it, because you can't just implement a job crafting
Mm,
program or give a workshop on it. You need to explore and find out what's going to fit for the
yeah.
organization. So yeah, there's no one
No,
size fits
absolutely,
all.
absolutely not, and nor should there be, from my perspective.
It's the whole
Exactly,
concept of job
exactly. So,
crafting.
in terms of the intervention itself, I'm curious about a couple of things. So, the first is in terms of the job
Mhm.
contracting component. There's obviously lots of different components there. Um, could you say a little bit about
Mhm.
what the job crafting component could have actually looked like? What were participants doing?
What would that we got them to start to think of the concept was of
Yeah.
looking at their career, but starting to think small. The organization has quite a um, is quite the mental health aspect and well-being is always
Yeah.
a pain point, which it is for many organizations too. I suppose you could. I looked at that well-being as there was a big focus on the well-being, especially coming into extra demand matters, for example, there, but also thinking about their tasks and control. There's junior employees that um, just finished their graduate program, just come out of, and then we had 2020 hit too. So they felt they had very limited control and autonomy, and you could see the engagement and the attention rate starting to
Mm.
decline there as well. Um, so starting to focus a little bit on that, and also how they could build their skills. So coming from a very structured graduate program, having a wealth of autonomy and not knowing how to where to go, what to do, where they want to specialize as well, it's bringing them back and starting to think small and starting to
Mm.
work there, thinking, is there something, a touch? Some of the one example is, and I'll use the podcast again. One wanted to learn. One participant wanted to learn more about a certain area that they're really interested in. So they found podcasts, listen to the podcast
Oh,
every day. Um, Well-being aspect. One had done a little bit of baking during lockdown and was really keen to get
yeah.
back his energy. So implemented
Um,
every day that routine. He noticed how much better
yeah.
more productive he was at work
And I think
as well.
sometimes you can. I think
Yeah.
sometimes you
So
can be. Or when I talk to people about this, similar examples to that, they light me up. They really excite me, but
mm,
people say they're too small. But so tell me
mm,
a little bit about. You've mentioned smallness a little bit, but do you
mm.
kind of feel that this is actually
Yeah,
really important, the small bit aspect of that, and maybe talk a little bit about that as well, Megan.
I do. I do think sometimes it can help to start small to implement a habit. Now, or something that I've crafted myself. If you think of like your
Yeah.
annual performance review, now that's a big, that could be a big goal. But how I helped, myself and is you break it into
Ah.
small chunks. Like what can I achieve now, and what can I do now. So it makes so using that, and I suppose that's why I looked at the concept of starting small, because it makes things a lot more achievable. And yeah, if you
Yeah.
break up a goal, yeah, definitely
And I
keeps
find that
that
it can
motivation
be
going.
sometimes helpful for people when they're
Mm.
starting off with a job crafting or doing something, actually saying start small, because if you start too big, people
Mm.
get a bit despondent if they don't able to do it, or it seems a bit too big for them. Yet if they start super small,
Yeah,
then they've got somewhere to go. They've got a runway of success as well. Um,
yeah,
and that's fantastic.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
and in terms of the intervention itself, was there any kind of curiosity from an organization, from leaders? Was there any kind of resistment, or um, was there anything from that perspective you had to work hard to kind of convince people to try, or actually were you fortunate that you were able to do this project kind of relatively unchallenged, as it were, or with support, or with warm support? Let's assume there's support as well.
um, I think initially it
Yeah,
was like, what is this? What is this concept? And it's working through that as well. And
mm,
like, what are the benefits? It did gauge some interest once I started exploring it and working alongside the organizational development team as well, um, from the innovation team. From others within the organisation, from some of the senior leaders as well, but also externally. Just being in that realm last year where we were just starting to explore different concepts of how we could
yeah,
keep ourselves, you know, engaged and motivated. Uh, Questions started flying from there, and yeah, it's been a
yeah.
very
Been interesting.
interesting journey there. Yeah, I think the most important thing
Yeah.
is senior leadership, um, having somebody
And would
who
you,
can
is that
endorse
the
the
advice? I was going
program
to ask you about the advice you
and
give to someone
understands
who are
it.
looking to develop a job crafting kind of
Mm,
intervention from that perspective.
yeah.
What advice would it be? Would obviously, at least engaging senior leadership's one. Is there other advice that you give to someone out there listening to this or watching
Mm.
this, saying, actually, there's a concept, it may not be job crafting, that I'm interested about exploring within my organisation. How can I want to bring that to life? What advice would you give to them to do that?
I think it's looking at what you need to look at it from an individual organization. It may not be implementing a direct program. It may be looking at things from a certain aspect. So again, it could be performance reviews and how they're done, or even the performance feedback process, because there's aspects that can be implemented there. It could be, like we were looking at retention, which delved into well-being. Um, it could be recruitment as well, and there's many other aspects. So looking at that problem, finding, asking the right questions, and looking at the research, because it may not be a direct program. It may be other small ways that it can be implemented. And I have actually heard,
Yeah.
when I was going through my research, of somebody implementing it and redesigning the whole performance
Wow.
feedback and review process, which is just a whole nother
So I love that
story.
idea of, I love that idea. Yeah, I can imagine. I
And you
think
can see
that
my
you've
eyes
got the
light up.
confidence and the ability to do it. I think having tested these frameworks as well, you can, and then there may
Yeah.
be, as you're saying, there may be, it's what's your challenges
Yeah.
now that you've got, and other ways of bringing in some of these ideas to
Yeah.
your existing processes that you've got, and then
Yeah.
that will give you confidence to maybe say, actually, yeah, we could do this for the
Exactly.
whole of performance appraisal process. Oh, something rather than just jumping off as you're jumping off your starting
Yeah.
point. It's around, again, starting small, I suppose, to pick up your idea, and
Yeah.
then from that saying, actually, I've got some
Yeah.
evidence here, I've got some confidence, I've got some buy-in, maybe, when I can to engage my
Mm.
senior leadership, we can take this further.
Absolutely. It can even be, through either leadership coaching
Oh
as well,
yeah,
about how they're framing a question, but also those career conversations that you have with the individual employees, like how you ask the question and get them thinking too. And I suppose that's putting on that
yep,
that coaching mindset as well, and it just gets the
fantastic.
curiosity
And
going.
then just lastly, in terms of your project, and
Mm.
I was wondering, did you have, in terms of the outcomes that you could, or the impact in terms of, could you say a little bit about that in terms of what you found at the end of the project, or actually is that still in progress? Kind of what did you find in
Yeah.
terms of the outcome of your initiative?
Yeah. Outcome for many, there was the increased confidence as well. Just knowing that they did have they could take control. They didn't have to just be that junior employee and need to do everything that was asked of them. They could reframe them or do things in little ways as well, and even like their work day, especially with the transition of returning to the office. Even I've had to rethink some of that as well, like what your day to day, what you do at home. If you're working from home, it looks very different to that day to day that you're working in the office, and etc. But some of there wasn't without some challenges. For some, again, as I mentioned, there was and this was part of the organisation as well. They do have a very strength focus within the organisation, and do promote that use of the character strength, which is where that tied into my program as well. Keep the consistency. But it's and sorry, I just lost me there as well. But sorry, the challenge, the weaknesses. There were some who just really just didn't understand. They're like, but I should be focusing on my weaknesses and increasing those. I'm like, well, what about, think of one of your strengths, and how can you tap into that to think of your weakness, weakness different, or reframe something that you're not so great at. So it's working through that as well.
So the outcomes are kind of, you're saying, increased on confidence, but again, a framework for people to actually really to apply this stuff.
And we all have things we're not so great at. It's how we think about them as well. I suppose that could also be my predominantly positive outlook on
we were
on
saying
life.
at the
It's still a
start of the
realist.
you just read Think Again, isn't it, by Adam Grant? So it's okay. We need to, so it's important, I think, to challenge ourselves on what our assumptions, our kind of mindsets that we have, I suppose, to make sure that they are true. And that's, I think you mentioned thinking like a scientist, Megan, which I think is something we need to, as best as we can, but practical, very practical scientists. So in terms of, I was just, so that advice in terms of an HR practitioners is really helpful for anyone who's, say, watching or listening to this. I'm just curious, you've mentioned one example of how you've kind of job crafted your own role in terms of the appraisal process. But I was wondering, are there other examples that you kind of currently you use yourself for individually job crafting?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I was speaking about my work day as well. Everything got a bit crazy, homeschooling everything last year. So something that I started, I realized as I lost many of that relationship, I needed to work on the relationship building in a different way. So I intentionally, and again, I use the tiny habits thing. So tiny habits method. So just setting aside like just 10 minutes at the start of my day to connect with or reconnect with either like a professional connection that I may have not have spoken to for a while, or depending on what I needed on the day, a family or friend as well.
So I love that deliberate intention to connect with people. So boosting your relationships and sort of relationship crafting from that perspective, but also giving you permission to do.
Absolutely.
Sorry,
especially being
I was
a very open.
I love that fact as well that you're doing that from a personal and professional perspective as well. So it's not you're not saying it's one or the other here. It's actually, relationships are good no matter where they come from. Oh, that's
absolutely,
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Your mental well-being as well.
They're all the main points I wanted to cover. I think for me, what I find so exciting about hearing what you said, Megan, and I'll ask you to say anything else you want to kind of add to this at the end. It's just around how you've come across an idea, how you've found about or created some opportunities to actually test it within your organisation, meeting them at their current need as well. So it's not just saying I'm just going to just develop this or try this for the sake of it, but really slotting into something that actually the organisation has a need for. You've talked about engaging the senior leadership team, and you've talked about testing the ideas for yourself first before you before you could have
Hmm.
experiment on other people, I suppose, or kind of bring these ideas to life for other people. And obviously, you collected evidence along the way for this, which is a part of the report, but just in terms of part of your practice, if I understand. So, and you've given a great example of how you
Mm.
jobcraft and or how you have used jobcrafting. So, thank you so much for that. And is there anything else you wanted to say about jobcrafting for people who are listening to this, Megan, or any other thoughts or advice that you might have?
I think the main thing is be curious. We're in an ever change. Things are just fast tracked how we're working in the past, and how things will continue to change in the next in the well in our future. So it's just really just revisiting that aspect and thinking about how you can adapt to that and change, small things there too. Um,
Yeah.
Even, the future is hybrid. Um, and I say that as I'm developing a learning activity for a hybrid training session. that's that's a whole nother story there too. But yeah, just remain
Mm.
curious, just revisit things, rethink things
Yeah,
too.
brilliant. I love that. Just
Um,
stay curious, stay curious. I think something, and hopefully people who are listening to this
mm,
will be curious and anyway. But I think that
exactly.
idea to continue learning is so important for us all. Um, Megan, thank you so much for your time. If people wanted to
Absolutely.
connect with
Yeah.
you, what would be the best way to, or find out more about what you said? Is it through LinkedIn? Is that the best? Is that the best way for people to contact you? I know that you share lots of interesting articles, and I benefit from those occasionally.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Um, and
Thank you. Um, yes, the best contact is via LinkedIn. Just Megan
Yeah, of course.
Chalmers, I
And
think.
thank you. From my perspective, can I just
AU.
say thank you so much for your time and your energy and just the great case examples that you've given today. So rich, and I've really valued hearing from them. So thank you so much.